At midnight, my grandma whispered, "Don't go home." I listened, and minutes later, police surrounded my street. If you're wondering what led to that moment, buckle up. Stay with me while I tell you what happened, and if this story speaks to you, show a little love. Hit that subscribe, drop a like, and maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Nyla Green. I'm 23 years old, and right now I'm studying nursing. But more than anything, I'm just a young woman trying to figure out life. I've been blessed to have my grandmother, Claudine, by my side since I was a child. She raised me when my parents walked away. They left without a goodbye, and it was Grandma who picked up the broken pieces of my life. She became my safe place, my guide, and the strongest person I know. Grandma Claudine is not like most people her age. She's quiet, but her silence isn't empty, it's full of wisdom. She has this way of seeing through people, even when they try to smile in her face. She always says, "Baby, people can hide words, but not energy." I used to laugh at that, but the older I got, the more I realized she was right. For the past 3 years, I've been with Darius Holt. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: handsome, ambitious, charming. Everyone said I was lucky to have him, and in the beginning, I believed it too. He'd show up at my classes with coffee, send me texts to remind me to eat, and talk about our future like it was already written. He made me feel like we were building something real. That's why, when he suggested we get our own apartment together, I didn't think twice. To me, it felt like the natural next step. I imagined us decorating, cooking meals together, and creating a life that finally felt like mine, not just a dream. But Grandma didn't smile when I told her. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, and her eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, didn't leave mine. "Nyla," she said softly, "something about that boy don't sit right with me." I frowned, brushing it off at first. "Grandma, you just don't know him like I do. He's good to me." She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She just sipped her tea and said, "I see lies behind his smile. You might not see them now, but they're there." Her words stuck to me like glue, even when I tried to shake them off. Because deep down, a small part of me wondered if she was right. I wanted so badly to believe in Darius, in the future we planned, that I almost ignored the one person who had never been wrong about people before, my grandma. What I didn't know was that her quiet warning would one day save my life. The first time I noticed something was off, it was so small that I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. Darius and I had just finished dinner one evening, and I mentioned I was going to meet up with my best friend, Monique Tanner, over the weekend. We'd been close since high school, more like sisters than friends. But when I said her name, Darius's face changed. His smile dropped, and he leaned back in his chair like I'd said something offensive. "I don't like her," he said flatly. "She's a bad influence on you." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. Monique had always been my rock, through exams, heartbreaks, even when I was struggling with money. But Darius wasn't joking. He leaned closer, his voice sharp. "If you care about me, you'll stop hanging out with her. She doesn't want what's best for you. She wants to drag you down." It was so sudden and so unexpected that I froze. I remember nodding just to keep the peace, but inside I felt a flicker of unease. Why would the man who claimed to love me want me to let go of the one person who had always been there? That flicker grew over time. Slowly, Darius started shaping my life in small, quiet ways. He didn't like when I spent too much time with classmates after study groups. He complained if I stayed on the phone with family too long. At first, I excused it as him just being protective, maybe even jealous because he cared so much. But as the weeks passed, I realized my circle was shrinking. Friends I used to see every week now sent me texts asking why I was so distant. Even family gatherings became rare, because Darius always had some reason why we couldn't go. Grandma Claudine noticed the shift before I did. She'd see me sitting on the couch, phone in hand, half typing a message, and then deleting it because I knew Darius would be upset if I made plans without him. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she finally said something. Darius was sitting across from her, smiling that polished smile he always wore when he wanted to seem charming. Claudine set down her fork, folded her hands neatly on the table, and looked straight at him. "I'm old, but my eyes are still sharp," she said softly. "And I see lies behind your smile." The air in the room tightened. Darius let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "With all due respect, ma'am, you're reading too much into things. I love Nyla. I'd never hurt her." He sounded smooth, confident, but his eyes flickered for just a second, and I caught it. Claudine didn't push further. She just leaned back and sipped her water. But the silence that followed was heavy, like something had shifted that couldn't be undone. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that Grandma was just being protective, maybe even unfair. But her words lingered in my mind, and every time he smiled at me after that, I couldn't help but wonder what he was hiding. It was a Saturday afternoon when I first felt that sharp sting in my chest, the kind you can't explain but can't ignore either. Darius had picked me up after class, and we stopped by the store so I could grab a few things. I slid into the passenger seat of his car, tossed my bag on the floor, and that's when I saw them. A pair of earrings glimmering in the cup holder. Silver hoops, small but definitely not mine. I picked them up slowly, rolling them between my fingers. "Whose are these?" I asked, trying to sound calm even though my stomach had already knotted. Darius didn't even look at me. He just shrugged and kept his eyes on the road. "Those? Oh, they're my cousin's. She was riding with me last week. Must have left them behind." It was too smooth, too fast, and yet part of me wanted to believe him. "Your cousin," I repeated, searching his face for a crack in the story. He finally glanced at me, his mouth twitching into that half-smile that always made me doubt myself. "Yeah, babe. Don't start acting paranoid. Not everything is a big deal." Paranoid. The word echoed in my head, and I hated how it made me shrink back in my seat. I didn't press further. I just set the earrings down and looked out the window, but deep inside something shifted. It felt like a tiny crack in glass, a warning that more was coming. That night, while I was helping Grandma Claudine wash dishes, the earrings slipped into my thoughts again. I must have been quiet too long, because she looked at me with those knowing eyes. "What's heavy on your mind, child?" she asked gently. I hesitated before whispering. "I think something's off with Darius, but I don't want to jump to conclusions." She dried her hands, came closer, and rested a warm hand on my arm. Her voice was steady, almost like a prayer. "Don't ever ignore what your gut tells you, child. The heart can be tricked, but the gut speaks truth." I nodded, but the truth was I didn't want to hear my gut. I loved Darius, or at least the version of him I thought was real. I didn't want to lose him over something that might just be me overthinking. So I buried the suspicion, telling myself maybe it really was his cousin's earrings. But then came the late nights. At first, it was once or twice. He'd text me that he was working late, finishing reports or meeting clients. I told myself it was normal. He was ambitious, always talking about moving up in his career. But soon, late nights turned into the new normal. 11 o'clock, midnight, sometimes past 1. I'd sit by my phone, staring at the screen, waiting for a goodnight text that came later and later each time. Every time he walked through the door, he had an excuse ready. And every time, I swallowed my questions, telling myself not to push too hard. But in the quiet of my room, when it was just me and my thoughts, I could hear my grandma's whisper loud and clear, "Don't ignore your gut." And no matter how much I tried, I couldn't silence it anymore. It happened by accident. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just walking past the hallway when I heard Darius's voice. It was softer than usual, not the confident, casual tone he used with me. This was different, almost tender. I paused, my hand frozen on the doorknob, as his words carried through the crack in the door. "Renee, baby, you know I'm here for you. I told you, we're going to figure this out together." My chest tightened. Renee. I knew that name. He had mentioned her a few times, always in passing, saying she was just a coworker who helped out at the office. Nothing special, nothing worth my attention. But the way he said her name that night, like it belonged to him, made my stomach twist. I wanted to believe I misheard, but then he chuckled, low and sweet. "Stop stressing, okay? You and the baby are going to be fine. I'll take care of both of you." The words hit me like glass shattering. Baby. My ears rang. My hands shook so badly, I had to press them against the wall just to steady myself. Renee wasn't just another woman. She was pregnant. And not just pregnant with his child. I felt like the floor opened up beneath me. 3 years together. 3 years of promises, of plans, of believing I was building a future with him. And the whole time, he had been building a separate life with someone else. I wanted to storm in, to scream, to throw every plate in the kitchen at his lying face. But something inside me, maybe survival, maybe pride, kept me rooted in place. Confronting him would only give him power, and I wasn't ready to hand that to him. Not yet. Instead, I decided to wait, to watch, to see how deep this betrayal went. If he could lie this smoothly, I needed more than anger. I needed proof. So I started paying attention. I'd glance at his phone when he wasn't looking, memorizing the times Renee's name popped up on the screen. I learned the rhythm of his lies. Working late almost always matched the same hours her messages appeared. I began saving things quietly. Screenshots of texts where he called her my girl. Receipts he carelessly left behind. Flowers, fancy dinners, things he never once bought for me. Even small things like his sudden interest in baby stores we just happened to walk past. Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone again, his voice dropping low, full of promises I had once believed were mine. Each word was like a knife carving into me. But instead of bleeding out, I forced myself to collect every blade, every sharp edge of his betrayal. I didn't know yet what I would do with it all, but I knew this much. If Darius thought I would stay blind and quiet, he was wrong. I wasn't just his girlfriend anymore. I was the witness to his lies. And I was building my case, piece by piece. Grandma always seemed to know when my heart was heavy. She never pried, never demanded answers, but her eyes had a way of cutting through whatever mask I tried to wear. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my untouched tea, and she sat across from me in silence. The clock ticked softly on the wall, the only sound between us, until finally she spoke. "You've been carrying something," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I can feel it." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words caught in my throat. I wasn't ready to tell her what I had overheard, what I had begun to piece together. So I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just tired from school." She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way her gaze lingered, in the way she set down her teacup with deliberate care. Then she leaned back in her chair, her hands folding in her lap. "Let me tell you something about myself, Nyla. Something I've never told you before." I blinked, caught off guard. Grandma rarely spoke about her past. Most of what I knew came from little scraps. Stories about cooking in her mother's kitchen, or walking miles to church as a girl. But this was different. Her tone was heavier, almost warning. "When I was your age," she began, her eyes distant, "I was in love with a man who smiled sweet and talked sweeter. Everyone said he was no good, but I ignored them. I told myself they just didn't understand us. My gut, it whispered at me every night. But I pushed it aside. I wanted to believe in him more than I wanted to believe in myself." She paused, her lips pressing tight. "One night, I learned the truth the hard way. He was living another life behind my back, and by the time I saw it clear, I'd lost things I could never get back. My peace, my trust, even a part of myself." I swallowed hard, goosebumps rising on my skin. It felt like she was speaking directly into the storm swirling inside me. She reached across the table, her hand warm and steady as it closed over mine. Her grip wasn't harsh, but it held a strength that made me sit straighter. "Listen to me, child," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "When the time comes, trust me without question. Even if it sounds crazy. Even if it makes no sense to you in the moment. Do you understand?" Her eyes locked on mine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what she meant, not fully. But the weight in her voice made me nod without hesitation. "I understand," I whispered back. She squeezed my hand once, then let go, leaning back as if the moment had passed. But I knew something had shifted. I didn't know what storm was coming, but I felt it in my bones, Grandma did. And when it arrived, I'd have to trust her with everything. Darius had been acting unusually cheerful for days, almost like he was hiding something behind that big smile of his. One evening, he called me, his voice full of excitement. "Nyla, I've got something planned for us. A special night at the new apartment. Just you and me, no distractions." The way he said it should have made me feel loved, but instead, a tightness coiled in my stomach. Ever since Grandma's warning, I'd been on edge. The thought of being alone with him in that place, our supposed fresh start, didn't bring comfort. It brought unease. When I told Grandma about his plan, she set down the bowl she was mixing and stared at me like she already knew what I was going to say. "Don't go," she said simply. Her voice wasn't raised, but the firmness in it was louder than any shout. "Grandma, it's just dinner," I argued, trying to sound calm. "He wants us to celebrate moving in. Maybe I'm overthinking things." Her eyes narrowed, and she shook her head slowly. "The Lord gave you instincts for a reason, child. Don't trade them for a smile and a promise." I don't feel good about this. I wanted to listen to her, I really did. But part of me still clung to the hope that maybe Darius was the man I thought he was, and maybe all the whispers of doubt were just me being paranoid. Against my better judgment, I told him I'd come. That night, I got dressed, still uneasy. I could hear Grandma moving around the living room, quiet but restless, as if she were waiting for something. As I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, she suddenly appeared, her face pale but steady. She took my wrist, her grip firm, and leaned in close. "Don't go home," she whispered, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. "Not tonight." The words stopped me cold. Her eyes, sharp, serious, almost pleading, sent a chill through me. This wasn't just her being protective. This was different. Urgent. "Grandma," I started, but she shook her head quickly. "Don't ask questions. Just listen. Stay here with me tonight. Promise me." My chest tightened. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was overreacting. But the way she held me, the way her hand shook just slightly against mine, made me swallow my doubts. I nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll stay." She released my wrist with a sigh, relief flickering in her eyes. Together, we sat in the living room, the television humming softly in the background, though neither of us paid much attention. I couldn't shake the unease that filled the room like heavy smoke. For the first time, I truly trusted her warning without question. I didn't know why, I didn't know what it meant, but that night I stayed. And deep down, I felt that choice had just saved me from something I wasn't ready to see. We hadn't been sitting long when the quiet night outside suddenly broke apart. First came the low wail of sirens in the distance, then more, closer, louder, multiplying until the sound filled every corner of the street. Red and blue lights flickered through the curtains, painting the walls of Grandma's living room in dizzying flashes. I froze. "What's happening?" I whispered, standing halfway from the couch. Grandma didn't move, her eyes fixed on the window. "Stay put," she murmured, though her face had gone tight. Within minutes, the noise outside exploded. Tires screeched. Doors slammed. Shouts filled the night, sharp, commanding voices that could only belong to police. I hurried to the window, my heart pounding, and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. Down the block, squad cars crowded the street in front of the apartment Darius had begged me to move into. Officers spilled out in bulletproof vests, some with guns drawn. The whole building lit up under their flashing lights. The quiet home I thought I'd share with Darius now looking like the center of a crime scene. I pressed a hand against the glass, my throat dry. "Grandma, that's our place." Her voice was low but steady. "That was supposed to be your place, child. Not anymore." We watched as officers rushed inside, shadows darting across the windows. Moments later, they dragged people out in handcuffs. My breath caught when I recognized the first one. Darius. His head hung low, his once proud shoulders slumped under the weight of two officers gripping his arms. But the shock didn't stop there. Following behind him, clutching her stomach and crying, was Renee, the very woman whose name I had heard whispered into his phone. And she was pregnant, just like I had feared. The sight knocked the air out of me. Everything I'd tried to ignore, everything I'd tucked away in the dark corners of my mind, was laid bare under flashing lights. Darius wasn't just cheating. He was living a double life built on lies and crime. The next morning, the news confirmed what we had seen. A sting operation. Drugs, stolen goods, fraudulent documents, all found inside that apartment. Police had been building the case for weeks, waiting for the right moment to move in. And if I had gone there that night, I would have been sitting right in the middle of it all. I sank into the couch, numb, my hands trembling in my lap. My whole world had tilted on its axis, but one truth rang louder than all the chaos. Grandma had saved me. Her warning hadn't just kept me safe. It had kept me from being dragged into a nightmare I could never have explained my way out of. As I looked at her sitting calmly beside me, I understood the weight of her whisper. "Don't go home. Not tonight." Those words had kept me free. The first week after Darius's arrest was a blur. Reporters lingered near the building, neighbors whispered, and every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. People didn't just know what Darius had done. They knew I had almost been part of it. I tried to keep my head high, but inside, shame weighed heavy on me. Then the letters started. At first, I didn't understand why the mail felt heavier than usual. But tucked inside the stack of bills and flyers was an envelope with my name scrawled across it. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. It was from Renee. Her handwriting looped across the page, smug and cruel. "I've known about you from the beginning. He told me you were nothing serious, just someone to keep around until he built the real future, with me. You really thought he was going to marry you? Sweetheart, you were the placeholder." I sat at the kitchen table, gripping the letter so tightly my knuckles went white. My chest burned with humiliation. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. More letters followed in the weeks after. Some slipped through the jail's mail system, each one uglier than the last. She bragged about how Darius loved her more, about the baby she was carrying, about how I would always be the fool who got left behind. She even wrote, "You should thank me. At least now you know the truth." Each word cut deeper than the one before, but slowly, something inside me began to shift. The shame started burning away, replaced with a sharp, simmering anger. It wasn't just about Darius anymore. It was about the way both of them had played with my life, mocking me like I was too weak to fight back. One night, as I sat staring at another one of Renee's letters, Grandma Claudine walked into the room. She looked at the paper in my hands, then at my face, and she knew. She always knew. "They're trying to break you," she said softly, pulling out a chair beside me. "I just feel stupid," I admitted, my voice cracking. "Like they've taken everything from me. My trust, my dignity, my future." She knew about me, Grandma. She knew, and she still. My voice trailed off, choked by rage. Grandma reached across the table, her hand steady as it covered mine. "Listen to me, Nyla. Revenge doesn't always need knives or blood. It doesn't need screaming or fire. Sometimes it just needs patience. The world has a way of dealing with people like them. All you have to do is be smart enough to wait and steady enough to act when the time is right." Her words settled deep in me, heavier than the letters ever could. For the first time since everything had crumbled, I didn't just feel broken. I felt the faint stirrings of power. They thought I was finished, but I wasn't. I was only getting started. I had spent weeks drowning in their betrayal, but Grandma's words stayed with me. Revenge doesn't always need knives or blood. It needs patience. And patience was something I still had. Quietly, carefully, I began to put everything I had collected into order. The screenshots of late-night texts, where Darius called Renee his queen. The receipts from dinners and jewelry, things I never saw but she surely did. Bank statements I found tucked inside his desk, filled with numbers that didn't add up, money moving places it shouldn't have. Even the photos of him standing a little too close to her outside his office, thinking no one was watching. All of it, I organized into neat little folders. Every piece of proof he once laughed off as my paranoia was now laid bare. I didn't need to confront them face to face. That would have only given them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Instead, I thought about Renee's letters, the way she mocked me as if her victory was secured. That's when the idea came. Renee had bragged about her family before, how they were proud, how their church praised them for being upright and disciplined. I also knew from Darius's careless conversations that her parents were strict and old-fashioned. They believed in image above all else. What would happen if they learned the truth? Not just about her affair, but the baby too. So I printed copies of the messages between her and Darius. The ones where they laughed about sneaking around. The ones where he promised to leave me behind. I slipped them into an envelope, along with the receipts and a few pictures. No return address, no signature. Just cold, undeniable truth. And then I mailed it directly to her parents' home. It didn't take long for the fallout. A week later, word reached me that her family had cut her off completely. They called her a disgrace, disowned her for carrying on with a man already in a relationship, and with a criminal no less. The girl who once wrote me letters calling me pathetic was now standing alone, without the very support she thought made her untouchable. But I wasn't finished. The folders I had carefully built weren't just about love, they were about crime. Fraudulent accounts, unexplained cash deposits, names that didn't match up with real businesses. I passed them along anonymously to the investigators already working Darius's case. The man who once told me no one could touch him suddenly had more charges stacked against him than he could ever crawl out from. The irony wasn't lost on me. What nearly destroyed me, his lies, his cheating, his greed, became the very trap that destroyed them. Darius rotted behind bars with a heavier sentence, and Renee was left to deal with the fallout of her choices without the family she thought would always stand by her. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. They had tried to write me out of my own story, but I had turned their betrayal into their undoing. The courtroom was heavy with silence when the judge read the sentence. Darius barely flinched, but I caught the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes darted across the room as if searching for someone to pull him out of the mess he had created. No one came. His charm, his lies, his sweet words, none of it mattered now. The evidence was stacked too high, and the mask he wore had finally shattered. 20 years. That's what the judge gave him. 20 long years to think about every choice that brought him here. I walked out without looking back. For 3 years, I thought my future was tied to his, that my happiness depended on his smile. Now, I understood that all along, I was walking toward a cliff blindfolded, until Grandma pulled me back at the very edge. As for Renee, her downfall came quieter but no less painful. Her family's rejection cut her deeper than she ever expected. Friends who once admired her turned away when whispers of the affair spread through their small community. She wasn't the confident woman who mocked me anymore. She was just another person crushed under the weight of bad decisions. I didn't celebrate her pain, but I also didn't pity her. She chose her path when she laughed at my heartbreak. For the first time in months, I felt the air in my lungs without the ache of betrayal. Free. That's the word that kept echoing in my mind. Yet, freedom didn't come without shadows. At night, I sometimes thought about how close I came to losing everything. If I had gone to that apartment, if I had ignored the earrings, the phone calls, the whispers in my gut, I could have been sitting beside Darius when the police swarmed in. My name, my future, my nursing career, all of it would have been destroyed in an instant. That thought haunted me more than his lies ever did. But it also gave me a kind of strength I never knew I had. One evening, I sat on the porch with Grandma Claudine, the sun melting into the horizon. The air smelled of jasmine, and for the first time, peace didn't feel like a stranger. She reached over, took my hand, and said softly, "Sometimes love comes dressed as poison, but you live because you listened." Her words sank deep into me. I realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about listening to the people who truly loved me, the ones who stood quietly in my corner, even when I couldn't see the storm coming. I looked at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. "I'll never ignore my instincts again," I promised. "And I'll never ignore your whispers." Because in the end, her wisdom saved my life. And my vow was simple. I would never let anyone's poison disguise itself as love again. Do you believe Nyla was right to walk away from Darius and Renee for good? Or should she have given forgiveness a chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if stories like this keep you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next.